I want to bet that even the Splatoon OGs don't remember the Battle Dojo balloon race mode from Splatoon 1, where you and a friend would race to see who could pop the most balloons under a certain time limit on local multiplayer. Basically, no one played this, and the mode hasn't come back since, but there's a lot more to go over, so here's 12 more things Nintendo removed from Splatoon that are likely to never return. Enjoy. Alright, so we're going to start off hot here with some secret brands that you've likely never heard of if you haven't played the first Splatoon. With the first one being Famitsu, which as you may know is a real Japanese magazine focused on video games. In May of 2015, Famitsu would hold a competition for fans to submit designs for clothing to be added to Splatoon 1. And the winning designs ended up being the traditional clothing set, inspired of course by Japanese traditional clothing with a headband, apron, and sandals. The same contest was also hosted for Splatoon 2, with the ghillie suit winning. However, this set was canonically from the Forge brand, unlike the traditional set, which had Famitsu as its canonical in-game brand. Now, the second brand that's been removed was King of Games, which again was both a Splatoon brand and a real-world brand. Surprisingly though, there was only 2 pieces of clothing made for this brand in Splatoon 1, those being the black pipe tee and the white line tee, both having a kind of video game inspired look. I think it was likely introduced to the game to bring attention to the real-world King of Games clothing, which Nintendo made in partnership with a company called Edit Mode, to sell official Splatoon merchandise, which I didn't know about till now. Lastly, there was the Squid Girl brand. And no, we're not talking about Inklings here, but rather another collab brand with the anime and manga series, the Squid Girl. Seeing the similarities between Inklings and the Squid Girl, it seems that instead of suing each other, they decided to partner up and introduce the gear from the Squid Girl series into Splatoon 1, with the main character's hat, tunic, and shoes. I can't believe Nintendo doesn't do any of these cool brand collabs anymore, and I definitely think they should bring something like this back for Splatoon 3 at some point. Now, moving away from brands, let's get into a few things that I'm sure we're glad were removed from Splatoon. With this first one easily being the dumbest thing that Nintendo implemented into the game, which was the Salmon Run open hour schedule. When Nintendo introduced Salmon Run into Splatoon 2, they decided to only make it playable in periods of 24 to 36 hours per rotation, and would close for around 6 hours at a time. Now this wasn't always catastrophic for everyone, but for players with really strict schedules who just wanted to play some Salmon Run in their limited free time, would literally get locked out of being able to play it. Now some people may say that this was likely trying to replicate the job environment with opening and closing hours, but I still think it was completely unnecessary and stupid to implement. This of course was thankfully fixed on the release of Splatoon 3, with Salmon Run now being available 24/7. Now the second dumb feature was region-locked Splatfests. In Splatoon 1 and 2, the majority of Splatfest themes were different by region, meaning that Europe would have a different theme than Japan, and Japan would have a different theme than North America. This not only created divides between regions of the Splatoon community in general, but if you wanted to play Splatfest with your friends from other regions, you were just unable to do so, no matter how strongly you and your friend wanted to support a certain team together, which was honestly really sad. There were also instances where people would essentially envy another region for getting a way better theme than them. For example, in Splatoon 2, while North America was getting Vampire vs. Werewolf, we in Europe were getting front roll versus back roll toilet paper. Yeah, definitely a pretty dumb feature of the Splatoon series, but again, this was thankfully reverted in Splatoon 3, with all Splatfests now having global themes and global play. Now on the opposite end, there are a lot of things that us Splatoon fans miss profoundly. I'm sure you're going to agree with some of these, but the first one being the one I miss the most, which is Squid Beats. Squid Beats was a rhythm game where you would use your controller to hit scrolling notes to all of the songs in Splatoon 1 and 2 respectively. This was honestly a very fun pastime, but ended up being scrapped in Splatoon 3 and replaced with this dumb jukebox that only plays music. I'm honestly never going to get over this removal, and I still sometimes boot up the old Splatoon games just to play this minigame, but without the new music it just doesn't feel complete, so I'm hoping they add this back, but it's quite unlikely. But I'm sure a lot of people aren't over the other Splatoon 1 minigames that have gotten removed either. While waiting for a match in Splatoon 1, and at a standalone machine in the plaza, you were able to play a series of minigames on the Wii U gamepad while waiting for your match to start, basically being the OG Subway Surfers gameplay over a video. These minigames were Squid Jump, Squid Ball, Squid Racer, and as I mentioned before, Squid Beats. I remember myself playing the Squid Racer game the most back in the day, so I see why a lot of people miss these. But seeing as the Switch doesn't have a second screen like the Wii U, I doubt we're gonna get any of these minigames back unfortunately. Maybe as a standalone machine, but I doubt it. Another feature we sadly lost was with the amiibos, specifically the Callie and Marie amiibos in Splatoon 1. Now if you didn't know, the Callie and Marie amiibos were released a couple weeks before the final Callie vs Marie Splatfest in Splatoon 1. And they allowed players to relive the Splatfest atmosphere with a selection of songs they would play in the Splatfest setting. It's honestly so nostalgic to see, but they sadly didn't end up bringing this feature back for Off the Hook in Splatoon 2 after the final fest, which is honestly quite sad, and I can't seem to figure out why they wouldn't do this. It's never too late to update this in, but seeing as we're almost a year into Splatoon 3, it doesn't seem like they're going to give it to us, unfortunately. Lastly, a feature I'm sure we all miss is Miiverse. As I'm sure we all know, Splatoon 1's post system used Miiverse, which not only had an illustration posting feature like we know now, but also allowed you to post standalone text without having to painstakingly draw the letters out like we have to do now. Splatoon posts were also accessible in the Miiverse tab itself on the Wii U, which offered a much better experience with much more features than we have now. As we all know, Miiverse would wind up getting shut down later in the Wii U's lifespan. Miiverse will certainly be missed. Next up, we have a couple of smaller things many of us forgot from the previous Splatoon games that were suddenly removed without us noticing. The first one again being with the amiibos, where in Splatoon 1, all the amiibos had a feature where to get the game's hero weapons and amiibo gear, you would have to complete special challenge runs, which were modified versions of the single player levels. For example, with the Squid amiibo, you'd be given the Kraken special the whole way through the level, but under a certain time limit. These were honestly pretty fun, but I assume they scrapped this feature and just decided to amp up the features of the single player levels themselves instead of keeping them to the amiibos. Another subtle feature that was honestly quite useful was in Splatoon 2, where every time you leveled up beyond level 30, Judd would give you one Super Sea Snail after talking to him each time you leveled up. This was extremely useful, especially after Splatfest ended, to continue getting snails to upgrade your gear. But I assume they removed this to give more incentive for people to participate in Splatfest to make the sea snails feel more scarce. But I still think they should bring this back for when Splatfest ends in Splatoon 3, so we don't wind up being starved of Super Sea Snails completely. Now the last one is an extremely sad missing weapon that is never returning to Splatoon 3. As many of you know, Nintendo absolutely hates Dynamo Roller players and is never giving us the gold Dynamo Roller despite showing it to us in almost every content promotion. This is easily the most tragic thing Nintendo has done, and I can never forgive them for this. Nah, I'm playing, but give us Gold Dynamo, Nintendo, for real, please. So that wraps up my list, but what about you guys? What are some Splatoon features you either miss or are glad that were removed in Splatoon that I didn't cover in this video? I'd love to hear them in the comments. And before people ask, I decided not to include any stages, weapons, specials, abilities, or anything of the sort, as they are the things that are most likely to return to the game at some point, as we've seen in past updates. But also the fact that there would be just way too many to cover for this video. Anyways, go follow my Twitter. I love you all and have a good day.